This is Kathy from Gadgets Top 321, and in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at Kiri-same. I'm going to test it in a variety of pins and nib sizes ranging from a Pilot Extra Fine to a 1.5 stub nib. I'm going to begin with the Extra Fine nib. Now, there are two of these lighter gray type inks in the Iroshizuku line. There's a warmer one and one with a cooler blue tone. This appears to be the warmer one. And this feels pretty dry. I wouldn't call it scratchy, surprisingly, but it is just so pale. Look at, the read back on it. I'm just going to say not scratchy. Sot. Not scratchy. This reminds me, in the way it feels writing with it, reminds me of Diamine Earl Grey. Okay, next I've got my Sailor Pro Gear Slim with the Fine Nib. It's kind of has a low this ink has a low saturation, and so it feels like you're writing with water. Now, this Fine Nib feels a little bit better than the Extra Fine. I would say, I don't know if it's just because I'm looking at it relative to the Extra Fine. I almost said that the read back looks pretty good, but I don't think we're there yet. It didn't feel horrible. I guess I can put not scratchy on this one. It felt quite a bit better than the Extra Fine. This has some nice shading, and when it's a darker area, I like the way it looks, but as it shades, those lighter areas become a little too difficult to read. All right, next I've got my Sailor LeCool. I better make sure I'm in focus. This is hard enough to read. Okay, this feels better than the Fine. This is a medium fine. It's a different style nib though. It's not going to be just like your gold medium fine. This is the stainless steel, the entry-level stainless steel medium fine. We're starting to get dark enough here that this is tolerable. I'm going to go ahead and put nice on this. It wouldn't be my first choice of inks to use in this fine of a nib, but it felt pleasant enough. Next, I've got my Platinum 3776 with a medium nib. This looks and feels almost like I'm writing with a pencil. It's not smooth, but I am going to say, I can confidently say this feels nice. All right, now, next I've got my Kaweco Perkeo, which is a pen I enjoy using when I have an ink that's showing some nice shading. Yeah. This is very enjoyable. Look how the ink just almost wipes away completely. I'm gonna say nice on this, but it is pretty smooth. But you can hear the nib moving across the paper. I liked that. All right, next I have my Pilot Metropolitan with a cursive medium nib. This is very smooth. But it's laying down the ink. I guess kind of like when I do my ink smear here, this cursive medium is spreading the ink out, and so it's a bit lighter than it was coming out of the Perkeo. But I'm going to go ahead and put that this was smooth. All right. Yeah, I think I like the Perkeo and the 3776 better. That just feels, I mean, it doesn't look that much different, but let's see. And next I have my Jinhao X750 with a 1.5 stub. All right, and while that dries, let's take a look at some other papers. All right, I've got my ARC notebook here, and I was kind of going back and forth, kind of like over here. The extra fine, I put that it wasn't scratchy, but it was borderline nice. It wouldn't be my first choice. A really extra fine nib like this wouldn't be my first choice for this ink. The fine nib felt a little dry, but it was borderline. It was nice enough. The Lacoule, again, it felt nice, but it was a little bit dry. This is an ink that it feels dry when you write with it. The ink is coming out of the pen just fine. It's not like it's drying up and it's having trouble with flow. It's coming out of the pen. It's just so unsaturated that it's not very viscous. Your nib doesn't glide across the page. It's like you're writing with water. But when I got to the 3776 in that medium nib, it felt nice, and the Perkeo felt nice. And the Metropolitan was smooth, but like I mentioned before, it just spreads the ink a little too thin. This ink is a little too unsaturated to be spread that thin. Look, it's not feathering or anything on this ARC notebook paper, so that was nice. I like this warm gray. Let's see. Now, this is Rhodia paper. The extra fine did feel scratchy, there was no doubt. And the Pro Gear Slim felt dry. The Lacoule, though, was nice. And it comes out looking like you've written with a pencil. The 3776 felt a little dry. And let's see, the Lacoule, I have a feeling, in these writing samples, I don't have as many pilots as I did before. In previous writing samples, it was really overloaded with pilot pens. Pilot pens write so smooth and have rounded tipping, kind of like the Lacoule. I think they would perform well with this ink. I know my Diamine Earl Grey works great in my pilot pens. In the Perkeo, it felt nice. And in the stub nib, I see just a little bit of shading, but in the percale, it's hard to see it. You see it a little bit more in the Metropolitan, the nice shading, and you can see it a bit in the Platinum. Let's see, in my Leuchtturm, nothing crazy out of the ordinary, no sheen. It's almost, let me see, the Noodler's black had that kind of off black with a little bit of brown to it. This is also, I wouldn't call it an off black, but it's got just a little bit of brown to it, mostly gray. And when you put it down heavy like this, the letters, you can almost see a halo of ink. It's nice. I like it on this Leuchtturm paper. Let's see. I'm doing my papers out of order. My 20-pound copy paper. Let's see. I was kind of going back and forth. I was writing with it, and it wasn't scratchy, and I thought about putting nice, and then I decided, no, it's just okay. I wouldn't want to write a ton with it. The Pro Gear Slim was also not scratchy. It was just okay. Everything's pretty much just okay. The LaCool was the main one, and I've had, let me see, I had another pen like that earlier, where, yeah, or ink, Australian Roses. The LaCool was a nice balance between a nib that felt dry and a nib that was kind of too wet. And, you know, it's a pale gray, but it still just kind of wants to bleed through. Even with that, if you're not writing on the back of the page, it doesn't look terrible. But the LaCool was, I would say, the winner out of that group. And let's see, in my Tomoe River, no sheen. The Metropolitan has a lot of shading. Really, when you get from the medium fine to the medium, they were just really pleasant to write with. I don't know. Excuse me. A light gray or a lightish gray ink like this, it is so pretty, but I don't know if I would want to write a ton with it. It wasn't super satisfying to write with. It was interesting to see the ink go down on the page and the way it puddled up in places, and then it dried and you get that shading. But I don't know if this is one that I would want to write a ton with. Alright, if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.